Hi everyone! Welcome to the Stormwater Solutions presentation entitled From Minor Issues to Major Failures. What happens without stormwater record retention? I am Mandy Crispin, Editor-in-Chief of Waterworld with Endeavor B2B. I am filling in for Stormwater Solutions Editor-in-Chief Katie Johns. Let me explain how you can participate today. First, if you have any technical difficulties, please submit feedback to the questions window and our experts will help you. We recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these can cause issues with the webinar player. We will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but you are encouraged to send your questions at any time. To do so, simply type your question into the question window at the side of your screen and hit the submit button. Also, please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available within the next 24 hours. You'll be notified via email when the archive is available. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today's session. Lisa Craddy is the Director of Compliance at AQUALIS. Lisa began her career in the tech world and has brought that experience into her environmental work. With over 25 years of management experience and more than a decade dedicated to helping companies and municipalities navigate stormwater permit compliance, Lisa leads the compliance division at AQUALIS. She specializes in interpreting municipal, industrial, and construction stormwater permits, supporting regulatory compliance at over 1,400 facilities across the United States. Her leadership ensures clients stay ahead of evolving requirements while promoting responsible, sustainable stormwater management. Lisa, thank you for talking with us today, and you can go ahead with your presentation when you are ready.
Okay, thank you so much, Mandy, and hello to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. And I just want to start off by saying, as we get into the presentation and we talk about the guidelines and the municipal compliance, my focus today is on municipal MS4 permits. However, if you are here and you're representing a private company, you're under a general industrial permit rather than an MS4 permit, all of the same things that we're talking about today do apply to you as well. So just so you know that. Okay, let's get started. What we're going to talk about today is three different topics here. First, we're going to start off with understanding the regulations and what all of this is based on and why we are keeping good records and document retention on these permits. Then we're going to take a look at some case studies, and I'm going to identify for you some common shortcomings that happen that started out as smaller issues and then dwarfed into large, very expensive issues. And we'll talk about the reasons why and how to avoid those. And then finally, we're going to talk about how this all ties together with proper documentation and accurate record keeping and how that can save you from a lot of headaches. So let's get started. First, we're going to talk about understanding permit requirements. So all of this is based upon the Clean Water Act. Any general permit, whether it's an MS4 permit, a general industrial permit, they all come under the Clean Water Act, and they are a part of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, otherwise known as NPDES. The MS4 permits fall under this system, and they often vary, and a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today are general in nature. Just know that every state varies. So there are different requirements based upon what state you're in, but we're going to talk about this on a general nature and what the requirements are across the board. And so your state might be slightly different, but generally speaking, they'll be on track with this. So there are different requirements based upon size sometimes, but that's not always the case as well. For example, in New Jersey, they used to have a Tier A permit and a Tier B permit for smaller municipalities. The Tier B permit had less requirements because they were smaller in nature. That has gone away. In 2023, when they redid their permit, there is only Tier A now, and everyone is required to follow the same guidelines regardless of size. So there may be different permits. You can look that up on your state page. Okay, so what are these permit requirements in general? So we're talking about public education requirements. There's often outreach involved with that. There's participation from residents. There's the stormwater inspection side of things, which is illicit discharge connections, stormwater management post-construction, generally keeping your systems in good health, pollution prevention, good housekeeping. There's often an annual reporting requirement. Typically, you have to send a report of your compliance to the state upon completion of the year. There's the mapping and source identification requirement. This is very important as far as knowing what you have in your municipality, knowing what's installed, if it's a stormwater filtration system, or where the pipes are connected, and we'll talk about that a little bit more further into the presentation. Okay, so I'm noticing a lot of these permits are now putting in a watershed assessment program, and this is becoming more and more common as we're dealing with more flooding across the country. And so you will definitely see new things in the permits regarding your watersheds and putting together plans to prevent flooding, doing flood mitigation on that. And then I just wanted to say a note about program funding. A lot of these permits will have funding opportunities alongside them, not necessarily by the state, although they can be state level grants, but a lot of times your districts will have grants as well. So I encourage you to look into that, because some of the times the requirements are quite a few, and you can potentially get funding to help you with those. All right, moving on. So these are some general requirements: street sweeping logs, outfall monitoring inspections. It's a whole lot of inspections that have to be done as part of these permits. Your catch basins, your stormwater facilities, that would be your drains, ditches, swales, detention ponds, etc. DPW yard inspections. You have to look out for stream scouring and make sure you're repairing that. You have your ordinances that are traditionally posted online somewhere for everyone to see, retrofitting inlets, etc. So one of the things I also want to point out is the permits are starting to push more for privately owned notifications. In the past, it was really just what the requirements were for the municipalities. That has changed and has moved now towards, not that you have to manage the privately owned stormwater systems, but you do need to notify them in a lot of cases that they should be managing and taking care of their stormwater systems. So there is a bit of crossover there now with the privately owned systems. All right, so let's start talking about the whole topic of this presentation, which is what happens, the cost of doing nothing. And I'm going to give you 3 case studies, and these are just chosen basically because they're quite common in what they are about, but it shows you what happens if you do nothing and if you don't have proper documentation. And then we'll talk about how these scenarios could have been avoided and where they could have saved themselves a lot of money. So the first one is about erosion. This is a particular client of ours. When we were first introduced to them, this is a detention basin, and it's a 2-stage detention basin. So there's a top level, and then there's a lower level where the micro pool and the outlet structure is. And when we did our first inspection, you can see here, there was some erosion. This is an erosion crack going down the hill towards the micro pool, the lower stage of the detention basin. So our recommendation was to repair this. And then you can see 1 year later only, it turned into a 6-foot wide gully because no repairs were made. We'll take a look at some other pictures here to show you just how bad this can get. Water is a very powerful thing. And when erosion begins, it often starts out very small and you think, oh, we'll get to that. We'll repair that later. It's not the top of our list right now. And then in a very short amount of time, you can see here 6 feet down, pipes are exposed. And then this became a very costly repair because then you have to bring in a lot of material, trucks and all kinds of things to make this stable again. So they were upwards of $40,000 to repair this, what was once a small crack down the basin. Once it was repaired, you can see here we put down erosion matting. Looks great. Some more vegetation was planted. And then here we also have some flow control barriers, which just slowed down the flow of water. So it was better designed. So in an effort to stop this from happening again. The one thing about erosion is it only gets worse with time. It's never going to just remain the same. It will just continue with all the rain events that occur to get worse and worse. And in this particular case, it not only was an impairment to the basin, but it became a safety hazard as well, because you can see here, anybody could have walked through this. It looks like a field. A detention basin can often just look like a grassy field. And so if somebody was walking through there, it could have been very dangerous. So it all had to be roped off and for safety. So you can see here in just a very short period of time, the massive difference that occurred because the inspection was not adhered to and the recommendations rather were not adhered to. And then here's where it became repaired. Okay, case study number 2. This has to do with piping. So with piping, these are underground pipes. This particular scenario is an underground, it's a context CMP, which stands for corrugated metal pipes. These are very common, especially around where I live in Colorado. They are underground stormwater flow control, and over time they can get corroded and they have to be repaired. And in this particular case, this was a system that was installed in the 80s. And it was probably not installed with the stringent rules we have now. Now, if you install an underground system, there's lots of inspections that have to happen before it gets approved as being final. It wasn't like that back then. So this particular system had never been maintained. And when we came in, we saw holes punched in the walls of the pipe. This was an underground confined space inspection. And there were holes in there, and it was just starting to have the soil behind the walls of the pipe was starting to come out into the pipes. Wasn't terrible at this point. It wasn't anything danger related, but there was some soil coming out. So we notified them and said, you know, we need to repair these because what can happen is over time, if you don't, you risk sinkholes because the soil that is basically surrounding the pipes will erode away. And then you don't have the infrastructure to handle the asphalt on top of it. Sure enough, it wasn't repaired right away. And about, I want to say 3 years later, these holes started to get more corroded. And all of a sudden, and this part happened very quickly, the soil just started washing out of them. And so they were vast holes, gaping holes behind the piping. And so this is where all the soil had washed out. So not only do you not have the structure behind the pipes, but you have all of that soil in the pipes that's washing into your outfalls. So we went in there and we did a repair on these and we patched up all of the holes, filled the backside of them, and made everything really secure again. And then we can see some of those after pictures here. I did talk to some of our piping guys who repaired it, and they were shocked that a sinkhole hadn't happened. And that's how bad it got with the structure of the piping. And the only reason they feel they didn't have a sinkhole was because the worst damage happened to be under a concrete sidewalk. And so the concrete held it. But had that damage been just a little further over in the pipes next to it, it would have been under the asphalt, and they felt fairly certain that there would have been a sinkhole. So now it's all secure. The corrosion has been patched, grouted. There are other systems you can do to repair these type of pipes. You can completely line them, which is a very costly repair, but a very long-term repair. This would have been upwards of $800,000. So the client decided not to do that route and just do repairs, knowing that in another 5 to 10 years, they'll probably have to patch a little bit more. But that was the direction they went in, and now it's a stable system. But these repairs were quite costly. Even if it wasn't the $800,000, it was upwards of $100,000 to repair the damage. And our final example, these are what we call contact Vortex. These are hydrodynamic separators. They are stormwater systems that basically swirl the water in them. They trap the trash in the center, and then they allow the sediment to filter down to the bottom, and the water flows out cleaned. And you can see here, the trash and sediment is right up to the top of the chamber. And so there's massive amounts of sediment in this unit. And as you can see by the bullet points, there was no maintenance done on this in 20 years. They really didn't even know it was there. And then finally, I believe it was the city that came in and said they had to inspect their systems, which is why it's important to send those notifications to private residents or private businesses rather. And so they had us come out and take a look at it. Now, these type of systems are pretty easy to maintain if you're doing them on a regular basis. You bring in a vac truck, you take out all the water, there's some sediment at the bottom, and you take it off to be disposed of properly. In this particular case, because there was so much sediment, it would have been so many numbers of trips to the landfill, it would have been incredibly expensive. So what we did is we put these vac boxes in. You can see this picture up here in the top right. There were 2 of these on site that were completely filled with sediment. And they stayed there for a period of 3 to 4 days while we were getting all of this out of the system. And then roll-off trucks came in to haul that away. So it became quite a large project for them. Okay, so those are the typical things that happen if you do not do maintenance and if you do not adhere to inspections that tell you that maintenance is due. So how does this tie together with proper record keeping, and why is that essential for compliance? Well, in all 3 of these cases, and I'll just go through them one at a time. The erosion case, the issue was actually documented, but it was put on the back burner, and so those records weren't adhered to, and it got worse. In the case of the pipes, years went by without inspections, so there were no records at all. They didn't know there was a problem because nobody had gone underground to inspect it. And it was only due to somebody else coming in. In this case, it was the city came in and asked for records. So that could have been avoided, and it could have been much less costly had they been doing proper inspections and record keeping. And then finally, on the Vortex, the hydrodynamic separators, they had no idea when they were last inspected. Same kind of scenario. They were shocked to see how much sediment was in these systems and how much accumulation had occurred. So with proper documentation and inspections, that would have been known to them, and they could have done their maintenance much sooner. So let's go through record keeping. So decentralized data is at the heart of the problem here. You can have records, inspection records, but if it's decentralized, you have one department's taking care of this, another department is over here, and the records are all over the place. You're not going to maintain the information that you need to know when a system was last serviced or when it is due for maintenance. And there's also no way to show compliance. So under these permits, you are required to do inspections, to check your outfalls, to check your catch basins. All of those inspections are required under an MS4 permit. And if you don't have records to show that, if you're ever inspected, then you will get some type of notice of violation showing, even if you have done them, if you don't have the records to show it, then you're going to get a violation on that. The other side of this is on the residential side. It shows your due diligence when you have proper record keeping. So if you have taken care of all of your inspections and you've done everything that you should be doing, if a resident has a problem, let's say there's a flooding issue and they want to come to you and you're their first phone call and they're going to say, why is my yard flooding? You can show through your record keeping that you have done everything that you should be doing, that you've cleaned out your systems, the catch basins weren't overflowing. All of these things help you to be able to show your due diligence. Lost records, also a problem. You have employee turnover. You might have everything in one place, but if it's on one person's computer and that person leaves, then all of a sudden you're in trouble because you don't have all of the records. So that's another issue with centralized, decentralized systems. And then finally, that brings you to reactive inspections. So if you're not doing ongoing inspections or you don't have record of those inspections, you're going to be reacting to when problems occur. And everything is always more expensive when there is a problem that you're addressing as opposed to doing routine maintenance and inspections. I have one example of a client of ours that had a decentralized system. They had one department holding records, and then it got transferred over to another department, but all the records didn't transfer over with them. And they called us in because they had an underground stormwater system that they wanted maintenance on. They had just had a large construction project occur in their district, and they wanted us to come in. They knew the stormwater filters needed to be changed out and cleaned. So we came in, and we always do an inspection prior to maintenance because you need to know what you're looking at, how much sediment you need to take out of there, what the proper equipment is that you need in the case of where we needed back boxes instead of just a truck, that kind of thing. So we went in and we did an inspection, and these filters were squeaky clean. And we thought to ourselves, something's wrong here. They are wanting to change these out. They don't need to be changed. And we certainly aren't going to recommend maintenance when they're nice, clean filters in there. And then it became a question of, well, was there a problem with installation? Are they in bypass mode and they were never activated because of the construction project? So there was all these questions. It finally came down to the fact that the previous department that was managing these records had actually had them replaced, and nobody knew. And so thankfully we caught this in an inspection and saved them from having to redo work that they had already done. Okay, so what counts as a record? So in short, to answer this question, a record is anything that your permit requires. So it can be inspection records, it can be logs, street sweeping logs, that sort of nature, maintenance logs, repair records. All of these things are part of what we call your SWPPP, your Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And if you have an organized system where all of the permit requirements are in one place, then you can sail through inspections. And that is essentially the goal of keeping these records, is to save you money from costly repairs that are unnecessary and to not get violations because your records are not in order. Now, if you're not under a permit and you just have a system, a stormwater system that needs maintenance, your manufacturer of that system will have an O&M manual. And so that O&M manual will tell you what type of inspections it needs, what type of maintenance it needs, and you can keep those records based on that too. So it's not just for permitting that this is useful for, but also just to keep everything logged and maintained. I want to talk a little bit about asset identification because in the permits, they do require that you map your municipality. And this is for several reasons. First of all, it's to know what you have on site so that you know what needs to be inspected, what needs to be maintained. If you have detention basins that need to be pruned and cut back, and also where your piping is going. And the reason that's important to know is because for flood mitigation, if you don't know where the water's flowing to, when you have floods, it's very difficult to figure out how to fix that. Where is the breakdown happening and where's that water coming from? And so that is extraordinarily helpful for emergency situations, but also for general regular maintenance. So it's key to know where everything is draining to. And that's why your mapping becomes important. Okay, we have talked about all of the problems that can occur from not keeping records, not knowing when inspections have been done, not knowing when maintenance is done. And we've talked about stormwater systems, but this also applies to just your general underground infrastructure. So your piping to your catch basins, to your inlets, to your outfalls, and detention basins, and everything in between. Okay, so what are some of the other benefits aside from saving money over costly maintenance? Well, keeping good records, it gives you historical data. It supports future planning and budget forecasting. If you know what you've done in the past, you're much more likely to know what's needed in the future and how to budget for that. And then knowing maintenance might become due on a particular system next year, so we're going to budget for that instead of having surprise costs that come up. Detailed records also demonstrate your due diligence. We touched on this back in the examples with if you have residents that are complaining about something, you can show your diligence in taking care of the systems. You can also show a state inspector that you have followed all of the rules and not get any violations regarding that. So in short, proper documentation, it reduces liability and it reduces risk exposure. So what are some of the things, if you do come under an inspection, that you might be asked for? So the first thing you get asked for is a copy of your SWPPP. Now, there's lots of different acronyms depending upon what state you're in for a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It can be SWPPP is the most common. It can be an SP3. It can be called a PPC plan. There's lots of different acronyms, but it's also all the same thing. A stormwater pollution prevention plan is your guide to tell all of the people in your municipality what you are going to do to adhere to the permit regulations. It talks about your BMPs, what inspections have to be completed, and a lot of other information. You will also be asked for past inspection records, maintenance records, corrective action logs. So it's not just enough to have the inspections on file, but if there were issues, you want to keep those logs of what you did to correct the problem. So that's important too, to show that you followed up on the issues. Your documentation of your public outreach. A lot of MS4 permits will have public education points that you can accumulate, and you can show that in your plan as to how you have achieved that. Staff training, standard operating procedures, illicit discharge response. These are all parts of the permit that you could be asked for, and you have to produce in an inspection. Common issues that are cited during audits. These are things that I see all the time when someone comes to me and says, we're getting inspected. What do we need to show? These are some of the common things that show up as being addressed on their assessment of you. So missing inspection reports, annual records, lack of documentation of enforcement. That's what we were just talking about, not just having the inspection, but what did you do to correct? And leads to corrective actions, fines. Now, typically, if it's not an egregious thing, you didn't know you were supposed to hold records for this particular inspection, you can correct that immediately. You will probably get a notice of violation, which is basically just telling you you need to fix it, most likely. If it is egregious, I have seen people get fines right out of the gate. So it depends upon the severity. And then, of course, if you don't correct what has been put on the notice of violation, then fines can follow that too. So just basically, it's better to just stay out of all of that, keep good records, have them ready to go, and if you're inspected, and then you can sail through those. All right. So how can we help operators, MS4 operators, succeed? So I want to talk a little bit about AQUALIS and what we do to help our clients stay in compliance with all of these things. We have a team of experts that help you understand your permit. So permit interpretation, these can be 200-page permits. And if stormwater is not your day-to-day job, they can be very difficult to understand and know what it is that's expected of you. So we can absolutely help you to understand that. And then talking about the theme of this is centralized documentation and tracking. We have a robust compliance program that allows you to keep track of your records, but not only house your records. So we have an online document repository that is password protected. So we have that available to you, but we also have a team of people to back you on these requirements and send you reminders. It's time to do these inspections. If you have quarterly inspections, we'll remind you of that. And we keep on top of getting these documents and records from you so that you don't have to constantly be thinking about it. It's just ready. It's there for you. And the people are in place to help you know what's lacking and what's already completed. So that is something that we can offer. And also this sort of bleeds into audit preparation, where we assist our clients with, if they are inspected, whether that's an internal audit, we can help you with that. Or if it's an outside state inspection, we assist with that as well. And we can give what's called a passworded link for an inspector. What this is it's just a link to your eSWIP program. We call it an eSWIP, Electronic Stormwater Plan. And it'll expire at a certain point. So you're not giving never-ending access to all of your records to an inspector. You give them this link, it expires after a week or whatever you designate, and then access is shut off when they've completed the inspection. So these are a lot of different tools that we can help you with in order to stay in compliance and stay out of violations and fines. So in short, What it does, it saves you money and it reduces risk through preventative care. So documentation, in short, equals protection. And if you have that documentation, you can back up what it is that's required of you with all of these permits and regulations. So I'll end here on a final slide. These are some of the services that we offer at AQUALIS. The first column, stormwater compliance and consulting, is what we talked about today, but we offer many other services: inspection, maintenance, detention, basin repairs, and engineering services. So with that, I think we will open it up for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's especially interesting to me since I don't work on stormwater. I work on drinking water. So this is good things for me to learn as well. So we do have some questions coming in. And then as a reminder for the rest of you, if you have questions, you can just type it into the questions window and hit submit. And then we'll just get started. So what are the most common documentation gaps that you see during municipal audits?
Yeah, so that goes back to what we were talking about with the inspections. Logs and inspections are probably the most common. Those are your basic, for risk management and for, public safety, health and safety, welfare. Having those records is incredibly important. So having your inspections performed, having your logs, maintenance logs, repair logs, all of those things come into play. Public education is also another one. It's pretty critical. So you can do that as well on your website. You can have website resources and planning for funding. All of those things can be on your website. And it all sort of relates back to when you're talking about logs and inspections. With the flooding you've seen happening across the country, it's becoming more and more focused on. So a lot of these things, it's not that you can stop flooding because you've done your inspections, but you have more information at your disposal. And so you're able to better mitigate these issues. And it's also good for residents because they see you doing things. Your residents want to see their drains being cleaned out and things like that. So you can show that due diligence with these record keeping.
Here's a good question that just came in. How has the landscape changed with all the talks currently with the Clean Water Act rollback in legislation?
Yeah, great question. So I will say at this point, we know this can always change, but at this point, very little. And the reason for that is because there are very, very few states that are under the federal permit. There are maybe, I want to say 4 to 5 states, and then some other exceptions that are under that, depending on your lands. But the vast majority are under state permits. And so those are really unaffected by the federal rollbacks that happen because they are able to do their own permits. So at this point, I have not seen any changes occur due to that.
Someone would like to know how often inspections occur and what are the sizes of the potential fines? So is there a ballpark or?
Sure. I mean, it's all over the board, but I can tell you what I've seen. So as far the first question being how often do inspections occur? So that depends upon what you're inspecting. So everything has its manufacturer's guidelines if it's a system. So if it's a manufactured treatment device, some type of stormwater filtration system, the manufacturer will tell you, do quarterly inspections or semi-annual or whatever it is they deem. If it is under permits, so for example, it's you have to inspect your outfalls. That depends on the state. I can tell you a few examples that I've seen. They are typically, they're New Jersey. We'll stay with that one. We talked about that one earlier. They do a 20% per year, and then you have to have them 100% completed within 5 years of the permit. So it depends on what state you're in, and it depends on what system it is that you're inspecting. As far as costs go and fines, that really depends on how egregious it is. So I have seen fines be $30,000, $40,000 because this particular, if this was a private company, but they were exceeding over and over. They were basically polluting the waters. They were right on the water body, and they had concrete manufacturing, and it was going right into the water. So that was considered a really egregious issue, and they didn't give them any warning. They just came in and shut it down and said $40,000 fine. And then it was a continued fine every day until they fixed it. So that was a pretty large one. Now there was another one that I saw, which was far less, maybe $7,000 fine. That was one I just recently heard about, and that was because they weren't under the permit. They didn't know they needed a permit, and so they never applied for it. The I didn't know didn't matter. they were expected to know what they were supposed to do. And so they got a $7,000 fine. So they're kind of all over the board depending upon what the issue is.
Okay. And then this other question is kind of a follow-up to that. They want to know, are there notifications for upcoming inspections, or are they like just a surprise?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was just reading something over in the comments.
Sure. Are there notifications for upcoming inspections, or do they just happen?
Yeah. No, there are not. So basically what they do is they tell you what needs to be done, and that's detailed out in the permit, and then you are expected to do it. And you may not hear from someone for quite a while. It might be a year, 2 years. Eventually you probably get an inspection. I can't say definitely, but it is a high likelihood that you will get an inspection from the state, and then you'll be expected to produce all those records. So that's why we created this program, because we're having a lot of people who really just, stormwater is not their main business. And so it's not at the top of their mind all the time. And so by having us on hand to give them reminders and tell them it's time to get your quarterly detention basin inspection done, or it's time to go out and update your map and all the piping and the outfalls, et cetera. So we make sure that our clients stay in compliance with that, and they know. So we're the reminder service.
Okay, well, on that note, in what portions of the U.S. are your services available? Someone wants to know.
Mm-hmm. So we work across the U.S., so all 50 states, and there's no limitation on that. We are very steeped in all of the permits, and whether that's an industrial general permit, whether that's an MS4 permit, we work with all of them, and we have tracking programs across the U.S.
We have a question about due diligence. You were talking about that earlier in one of the examples. They want to know, does computational fluid dynamics play any role in predicting stormwater flow? Meaning, can a CFD study be considered as due diligence?
Yeah, it certainly can be considered due diligence, but it's not going to replace any of the requirements that you have to do. So anything you can do to predict flow, to mitigate floods, to figure out where your problem areas are, certainly would be a good thing. But the fact of the matter is, if you are not doing the required activity per the permit, you will still have issues with violations for that.
So, and then how often should MS4 operators be updating their stormwater management plans and associated records?
Yeah. So management plans, I can't say for every single state what the requirement is, but I know typically you're required to update once a year. So there is usually where you have to update your SWIP and you have to check your records. Maybe there's a stormwater management plan. There's various different plans that can come into play, and they should be looked at once a year and updated. That's the minimum. Having said that, these plans are living documents. And so you really need to be looking at these on an ongoing basis, because you might have employee turnover and your stormwater team has changed, or there are processes that have changed, or you've added new things that need to be inspected. So it is a living document, and you want to check in with it, not on a weekly or monthly basis, but maybe quarterly. Check on it and make sure you're keeping it up to date. But regulatory wise, I would say annually is a requirement.
Have you seen municipalities negotiate reduced penalties by showing partial records? So I know you were saying like sometimes just so egregious that they're like, forget it, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So can you negotiate it? And just because you said also that I didn't know is not an excuse.
That's right.
So
That's right. So I would say to that, I can never guarantee that if you have partial records, you will have reduced fines. But certainly it doesn't hurt. I have tried to negotiate for clients on behalf of them. It's not usually successful, although I will say that I have stopped it from maybe going higher, but there would still be a fine of some sort. And then I have had circumstances, the one I told you about, the example I told you about, where they were really just dumping into the water body behind them. There was no negotiation on that, regardless of what records they had, just simply because the act was so egregious. So, it depends. But if you're talking about really just the basics of the permit, you're not doing anything that's actively polluting, then I have seen where they come in with an inspection. We can, after the inspection has been done, show there were partial records. We do have, and it'll probably not be a fine. It'll probably be more of a, just telling you to get it fixed. And then they expect you to produce those records. So it's a matter of following up after. And we do that as well, where we write big reports for our clients about, here's where all the records, here's what we've done since the inspection. And we submit that to help with just closing out the violation.
See, someone wants to know, do you have any advice on developing stormwater inspections and maintenance programs for privately owned stormwater ponds that are regulated under a municipal permit?
Yeah. So that's a common thing that we work with. Stormwater ponds it's a great type of stormwater feature. They can, there's different types of ponds. There's wet ponds, there's dry ponds. Dry ponds, like I said earlier, can just look like a nice grassy field, but they have a real function. The water dissipates into the ground. And wet ponds is what you'd think of it traditionally as a pond, where it always retains the water. But it does have inlet and outlet structures where the water from the property goes into it. So as far as developing inspection and maintenance programs for those, I would say we generally put our clients on an annual program. Now, if it depends on what type of pond it is, because you may need quarterly pruning, you may need, really depends on how much vegetation there is. If it's a wet pond, annual may be sufficient to go in. And really what you're looking for is you're looking to make sure that those outlet and inlet structures are not clogged, that it's functioning properly, and actively filtering out water. So we definitely would look at the system and do a recommendation based upon that system, and then give you a recommendation on that, on what your maintenance guidelines would be. And it also depends on the condition that it's in. So if it's in rough condition to begin with, because it hasn't been looked at, we might come in and do a sort of overhaul on it, and then you can reduce and go to annuals or something, along those lines.
I love how engaged this audience is. We have a very engaged audience today. A couple more questions as of now. So if you still have questions out there, get your questions in. All right, so are fines from inspections more lenient this year with the changes to the construction general permit and the problems associated with conforming to the new rules?
That's going to be a state-dependent question. I have not seen significant changes. Where I do see differences is within each individual state. There are some state departments that really have a great staff that are on top of inspections and are all over. I have, certain areas where I'm getting calls all the time. We're getting inspected this week. Can, help us with this? There are other states where they just don't have the people to do it. And so they're far less likely to be inspected. So that it really depends on states. But as far as the actual question about fines being more lenient, I have not seen a big difference in that. But again, you know, it could be dependent upon state and their infrastructure to be able to handle it.
All right, now this one's a long one, so everybody take a breath. How are you seeing communities keep track of their SWP3 inspections, BMP maintenance inspections, IDDE outfall monitoring records? Are they using paper records, digital records, for example, in Excel or Word?
Sure.
Commercial software programs designed for MS4 programs, or in-house built programs, or some combination of all of those?
Yeah, I would say a combination of all of those. The problem with paper records are definitely going to the wayside because just the nature of them being able to get lost. They're difficult to go back and track, and they're difficult. You know, you get files and folders of paper records, and it's just not effective. So I would say it's definitely, I've seen a huge move towards electronic records in the last 5 to 10 years. It's been a major shift. So that's the most common. As far as what systems people are using, I don't know of any one system that seems to be the dominant one. It's kind of across the board. What we personally use, we use automated inspection forms, and we use an online document repository. So it's hosted online so that everyone has access to it with a password, a username, and login. Of course, it's very secure, so that you have, you know, if you have different people in different departments that need to access it, they can just log in and they have access to all their records in an organized folder structure. And then as far as the inspections go, they're online. You click a link, you do your inspection. You can do it from the field on an iPad. You can do it when you come back into the office on your computer. And when you hit submit, if you're doing our compliance program, a copy of that inspection goes to you, a copy comes to us, and then my team will go through it and look at it and give you corrective actions if necessary. If you don't know how to fix the problem, we're there as consultants to help you fix the problem, tell you what needs to be done. And if everything is looking great, we file it in the eSWIP and check it off as being complete. And then you know that requirement has been met. So lots of different types, but I would say electronic is definitely the way.
Yeah, especially with how you were mentioning earlier with employee turnover, or someone had it in a folder somewhere. I mean, this happens at my job too, right? Like someone put it in a folder, they're not here anymore, and it's like, now it's gone. We're never gonna find it. So.
Yeah, and no matter how organized they once were, if they're gone and they took their laptop with them, yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Okay, someone from New Jersey, I think, wants to know, specific to New Jersey, do you know what the required inspection frequency is for catch basins?
Yeah, I do know this. Let me think now. Catch basins. Yes, that's the 20% rule. So basically what the permit says is you have, let's say you have, you break your the number of catch basins you have across the municipality, you divide it by the permit term, which is 5 years, and you're expected to do 20% each year. So by the end of the permit term, you are at 100% completion for your inspections, and then it just rolls over again the next year. So if you haven't been inspecting and you're in let's see, we're in year 2 right now, it's 2023, so 2025, then you might have to up that schedule a little bit so that you're at 100% completion by the end of the permit term.
All right, and then someone wants to know, is there benefit in data sharing between municipalities? This is difficult given the different systems being utilized.
So where I've seen data sharing between municipalities and where it has been quite helpful is I alluded to earlier in the presentation about the Watershed plans that are now being required to do. And so I have seen municipalities band together and put their information together in order to come up with a really comprehensive plan, with the effort of flood mitigation being at the forefront of that. So definitely, yes, there are benefits to it. As far as the systems go, I can't speak for other people's systems and how easily it would be to share on that. I know with our system, it would be quite easy. All you have to do is ask us for a limited login, and we could give them login. We don't even have to give a login to the whole system. We can just give a portion of the system that you want to share. So it's very customizable on doing that. So I'm not sure how others' systems work, but for us, yes, we could definitely do that.
Okay, so this might be a little bit redundant of a question then, given what you just said, but can multiple contractors or consultants contribute to or work within your system, like based on that? Like they can, then I assume.
Absolutely. And so we have a lot of clients where we're managing the overall stormwater compliance for them, but they have other people doing inspections, and they have other people doing work for them. You know, maybe their DPW department, that's going to be internal, is doing their inspections. And then they have a client or an engineer doing some other work for them. All of those things, we want to keep it all in one place. So we would have all the records that you want involved in your stormwater program online in the system. Doesn't matter where it's coming from, it's all your total encompassing program. And so we make sure that it's a complete service for you.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to this very engaged audience. It makes me happy when we get lots of good questions. But we've answered all the questions here. We're about at time. So we're going to just conclude today's presentation. And on behalf of Stormwater Solutions, we'd like to thank Lisa for speaking today. You have been very eloquent and knowledgeable. AQUALIS for sponsoring this event. And of course, again, all of you for joining and all of your wonderful questions. And we're going to just wish everybody have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming.